So a very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today, our program bringing you all the latest news and events happening all around the Black Continent. My name is Angie Meher and I'll be joining you for today's edition of the show. As usual, we start with a look at some of the news making the headlines, and beginning with the Egyptian envoy of the African Union saying that Cairo has played a key role in drafting the second 10-year plan for African development. He was speaking during a meeting of the AU Executive Council of the African Development Agenda 2063 being held in Kigali, Rwanda. We have more details to follow.
Egypt's ambassador to Ethiopia and permanent representative to the African Union, Mohammed Gad, said that Egypt has exerted intensive efforts in drafting the second 10-year plan for implementing the African Development Agenda 2024-2033. He said that this reflects Egypt's commitment to advancing sustainable development on the continent. Gad made the remarks on Monday during Egypt's participation in the meeting of the AU Executive Council on the African Development Agenda 2063, which is taking place in Kigali, Rwanda. Gad said that Egypt's role in drafting the second 10-year plan stems from its chairmanship of the Steering Committee of Heads of State and Government of the AU Development Agency, NEPAD, which is the development arm of the AU and the main mechanism for formulating the plan. Gad also highlighted the Egyptian achievements that align with the aspirations of the agenda since the launch of the first 10-year plan in 2014. These include the initiation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, the Continental Infrastructure Networks, and the African Space Agency, which is hosted by Egypt. Gad also stressed the importance of linking peace and development and addressing the challenges of peace and security in Africa, which hinder the achievement of sustainable development. He called for enhancing the post-conflict reconstruction and development programs. The meeting, which will conclude on Tuesday, is a consultative event that brings together the relevant ministers of the AU member states, representatives of African financial institutions such as the African Development Bank, and organs of the AU led by NEPAD. The meeting aims to prepare for the launch of the second 10-year plan 2024-2033 for implementing the African Development Agenda at the next AU Summit in February 2024. The plan represents the comprehensive strategy for development, integration, and cooperation on the continent.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by Her Excellency Ambassador Suaid Chalabi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. A very good afternoon to you, Madam Ambassador.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, for your time. And let me start by asking you, what angles do you see Cairo having prioritized in the drafting of the second 10-year plan for African development?
Well, Egypt has been one of the major countries in Africa that had been involved in the Agenda 2063.
Yes.
And of course, the sustainable goals, the UN and the African Union together, they had put a strategy for the executing the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals and
Yes.
The African Union Agenda 2063. And there had been a 10-year plan that has been done now, and now they are evaluating the first decade since we started. It's going to end this 2023. Now we are starting another decade, starting 2024 to 2034. And this decade, it will be launched to have different targets for development for all the African countries. And there is the strategy for development and integration that had been put in place also. So the Executive Council is meeting now in Kigali to review and to assess, evaluate the first decade and formulate the future that will happen towards 2063. We have to do another 10-year plan for development of Africa.
Indeed. Madam Ambassador, now Egypt's envoy to the AU, the Egyptian ambassador to Ethiopia and permanent representative to the African Union, Mohamed Ged, said that Egypt is committed to the advancing of sustainable development on the continent. How important do you see this address, especially for Africa to work on advancing sustainable development in light of the current global circumstances?
Egypt is meeting now in Kigali in the Executive Council. The Executive Council is one of the 7 institutions of the African Union. It's one of the highest executive board, and then Egypt plays a pivotal role in this Executive Council. Every year in the meetings there is an input that Egypt does for the with its role in drafting the 10th plan for African development. Also the Agenda 2063 that Egypt also is playing a bigger role in formalizing the strategy of development in Africa and in the rate of growth. Egypt also has been presenting its vision towards to coordinate and to empower the different sectors of development, whether it is climate change, whether it is empowerment, whether it's of the financial institutions, whether it is trade and investment. So in every sector, Egypt has been developing its vision and had been playing a role in evaluating and in formulating the vision.
Absolutely.
Towards the future.
Yes, indeed. Speaking about Egypt's role, Ged also highlighted Egyptian achievements that align with the aspirations of the agenda since the launch of the first 10-year plan in 2024, one of which includes, of course, the initiation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, the Continental Infrastructure Networks, and the African Space Agency, which is also hosted by Egypt. How do you see such achievements and their importance, Madam Ambassador?
Of course, it's very important what Egypt did in the climate change sector, for instance,
yes.
And the fund that was developed during the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh in order to have a special fund for recuperation and for damage control of the climate change in Africa. Also, Egypt has been playing a big role in the agriculture and food security sector in the African Union, in rural development, of course in the blue economy, as I said, in the climate change, in sustainable environment and blue economy, and the possibility of financial institutions helping projects that are developed in order to face the drought and humanitarian disasters that are facing Africa. Also in the field of peace and security, there
yes.
have been a lot done that has been done during the past few meetings, and also there has been shed lights in the Executive Council on the importance of peace and security, especially after what happened in the West African region with the continuous instability that is taking place in West Africa, and this has been also highlighted, especially what is happening in Sudan, what is happening in West African region, in Gabon, in Niger, so in the Niger, I mean. So it's very important the role that Egypt is doing now, especially in this meeting where they are looking at, for instance, women role, also the gender and the youth the civil society and the diaspora. All these issues have been under discussion for the next 10 years, how we are going to continue to be present and to be active. How is Egypt going to coordinate its strategy for sustainable development together with the Agenda 2063, which the African Union is highlighting now. So the Executive Council of the African Union and all the ministers who are present now, ministers, the specialized ministers of all the African states, and the RECs and the REMs are discussing everything that has to do with the future of Africa, foreign trade, energy, mineral resources, as I said, food and agriculture, the water resources, transport and communication, education, how we can present this future to the youth of Africa. How can we establish a system of financial rewarding for the countries who have been affected by disasters and food crisis? So it is a whole function that has to be addressed by the council, the executive council, and the partners, and also the cooperation between the financial institutions and the African Union, our partners, and also the economic commissions that are, whether it is the UN Economic Commission or the development banks like the African Development Bank, and also the other African financial institutions that have to be cooperating together in order to be able to meet the decisions of the Executive Council. And of course, it is going to be declared what is happening, because they have all to agree on the next 10 years plan.
Indeed. Right. Your Excellency, Ambassador Souaed Chalabi, the former Assistant to Foreign Minister, thank you very much, ma'am, for your time and all your insight, and for joining us on today's edition of Africa Today, and still bringing you more news from around the African continent. Hundreds of thousands of South Sudanese refugees fleeing Sudan's brutal war are now facing a hunger emergency. The United Nations voiced a warning on Tuesday, adding that 90% of families are now going multiple days without a meal. We have the details.
Fighting between forces loyal to Sudan's army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his former deputy Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo has forced nearly 300,000 South Sudanese to return home in the last 5 months. The statement was made by the UN's World Food Programme, WFP. The WFP said the crisis was taking a particularly harsh toll on its youngest victims, with 20% of children under 5 malnourished. Mary Ellen McGrorty, WFP's county director in Juba, said they are seeing families leave one disaster for another as they flee danger in Sudan, only to find despair in South Sudan. Since fighting erupted in Sudan in mid-April, at least 7,500 people have lost their lives, according to a conservative estimate from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Multiple truces have failed to stop the violence that has driven tens of thousands over Sudan's borders and raised fears of a humanitarian crisis engulfing the wider region. The WFP said the South Sudanese, who account for almost all the refugees arriving in South Sudan, are returning to a country already facing unprecedented humanitarian needs. Torrential rains, pummeling crowded camps, and border crossings have worsened living conditions and exacerbated the spread of diseases. One of the world's poorest nations, South Sudan seceded from Sudan in 2011, but was immediately plunged into a brutal conflict that left the young nation divided and traumatized. Some 380,000 people died in 5 years of bloodshed before the civil war formally ended in 2018, with a ceasefire between warring leaders who remain in power today. The nation of more than 60 ethnic groups and 12 million people continues to grapple with deadly violence, natural disasters, and relentless political infighting. The UN has repeatedly criticized South Sudan's leadership for its role in stoking bloodshed, cracking down on political freedoms, and plundering public coffers. 4 out of 5 South Sudanese live in absolute poverty despite large oil reserves, according to World Bank figures for 2018.
And for our final news item, 29 soldiers were killed in western Niger in an attack on Monday night. Niger has declared a 3-day national mourning period following the incident. We have more details.
Niger's defense ministry said in a televised statement that soldiers were targeted using improvised explosive devices and kamikaze vehicles by more than 100 terrorists, which resulted in the killing of 29 soldiers. The attack took place near the country's border with Mali. It came during military operations aimed at neutralizing threats posed by insurgents in the area. The Ministry of Defense said communications from the terrorists who were forced to withdraw have been intercepted, adding that the attackers benefited from outside expertise without giving any further details. An insurgency has plagued Africa's Sahel region for more than a decade, breaking out in northern Mali in 2012 before spreading to neighboring Niger and Burkina Faso in 2015. The three borders area between Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso is regularly the scene of attacks by militants. The violence has fueled military takeovers in all three countries, with Niger the latest to fall to a coup in July 26 that ousted Mohamed Bazoum as democratically elected president.
And with this, our final news item, we wrap up today's edition of Africa Today. We're in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Thank you for joining us.